Hi, Read 508. So this week is a little bit different. I've decided to give you two PowerPoint presentations. The one that I'm going to talk about this evening is the one from the book that we're reading, our current text. And I left the one from the older text in the course as well, so you could take a look at it. So this week we're talking about emergent literacy and all that is involved with emergent literacy. So the objectives are to describe the characteristics of emergent readers and writers, describe how teachers can promote language and vocabulary development in the emergent stage, explain the importance and the relationship between vocabulary and phonological awareness in the emergent stage, and later reading achievement, and then analyze how readers grow and change throughout the emergent stage of development. So, what is emergent literacy? It is everything that goes on long before kids are able to read or write. They begin developing those skills to help them to execute those functions. So, it's all the developmental steps that young children need to take before they can actually begin the act of reading. So, kids pretending to read, pretending to write, making up stories. Um, Kids who have emergent skills have phonological awareness, they have print awareness, they have letter awareness, and we know that emergent literacy builds those skills. And that time is really, really important to their success later on. So if kids perceive reading as a fun activity, it's more likely that they'll continue to use those skills when they are older. And parents and teachers who engage kids in these types of activities really help set the stage for readers to be successful. It's why Head Start had such a was such a powerful thing, and why there's such an emphasis on the first 5 years of life, because we know that it makes an incredible difference in um, literacy skills later on. So the foundation of literacy in the text, they talk about oral language, so having meaningful conversations with kids, in order to build receptive and expressive vocabulary. So, expressive vocabulary is the vocabulary that kids use regularly to communicate, and then the receptive vocabulary is that vocabulary that kids will recognize in context when they hear it, but it's not necessarily vocabulary that they use on a regular basis. And teachers, as I said earlier, play an important role. So, teachers can scaffold development and skills within the structures of the day. And children imitate the language of adults. So oftentimes you'll hear um, kids who sound like little adults, or maybe if you have your own kids, you hear them repeat your pronunciation of something or just a way that you say something. It's because they automatically mimic adults. So in terms of talk, it's the teacher's job to ensure that there are opportunities to have personal conversations with kids, opportunities to improve the quality of talk, so bringing in new words and more sophisticated words or vocabulary, um, to speak in syntactically complex sentences. So using those transition words, however, since, although, using complex sentences that will lead to students also using complex sentences. Um, and you can scaffold that for children as well, their grammatical experimentation, just by speaking to them in more complex ways. And engaging children in authentic and sustained conversations. So authentic meaning, talking about maybe in the morning meeting, having kids talk about their weekend, talk about their day. You can talk to kids on the playground. Things, just having a regular conversations with kids will help to improve their expressive and receptive language. So creating meaningful context. Play is a huge part of emergent literacy. So play centers or learning centers with literacy related objects are super important. So maybe a place where they can do dramatic play. So maybe a puppet theater, a little acting theater. A writing center is always a good thing to do, so that they get in the habit of, even if it's pretend writing or the early writing, the scribbling. That's great. An investigation, social studies or science investigation center, um, dramatic reenactment, blocks, art, library, a letters center, an ABC center. These are all really, really important parts of emergent literacy. So that's why in a quality preschool or transitional kindergarten, you're going to see, or you should be seeing, this type of environment with different types of centers and opportunities to explore the various types of literacy. Written text. You want to expose kids to written text. So reading to them, big books, talking about the story elements of and language of stories. So in fairy tales, they have predictable language and happily ever after, and um, rhyming books that pointing out the rhythm and the structure of the language, and just having heightened awareness of experiences, giving them a heightened awareness of experiences outside of their natural contexts. Um, Storybook reading also helps to build and sustain meanings and mental images for kids. So um, all this is going on just when you're reading a story. Um, you also want to make sure that they have that you read to them from informational text, so they have both the fiction and the expository um, background. Engage children in thematic studies and the world around them. So maybe a unit on insects or on the community, anything that's relevant and engages them is a good thing. And in introducing that academic language, the domain specific vocabulary. So, being a scientist and hypothesis and the language that scientists use, or um, anthropologists or sociologists. You want to expose kids to that academic language early on. Other types of text for emergent readers include poetry, finger plays, nursery rhymes, songs, environmental and functional print. That's that labeling everything, labeling the desk, the computer, the wall, um, the whiteboard, everything. Bringing in things like a McDonald's sign, or the things that they see in their outside daily lives. That's also a good thing um, to bring up in for emergent readers. Concept books, so books that are built around a particular theme or a concept, and of course, big books are always a good idea. Um, Reading aloud, so dialogic read alouds. They talk about this in the book, but what this means is that you're reading and you're asking questions, and there's a dialogue going on between you and the listener while you're going through the text. And then text talk just meant to increase vocabulary knowledge. So those are also good things to do with young learners. So how to decide on the vocabulary that you want to use. There are those high frequency words, high utility words, words that come up most often in text. There are semantically related words, so words that have the same morphological roots or prefixes, words that where meanings are similar. Those are all good things to teach and talk about. Words that can be represented physically, um, conceptually related words. So they talked about these words pretty extensively in the book, but these are also just by um, exposing kids to that, to the centers and reading and different types of books and different types of print. You're automatically exposing them to a lot of this vocabulary. Concepts of print. So concepts of print are really just those things that readers know about books. So the book has a cover, it has a spine, it has a title page, it may have a table of contents. We read from left to right and from the top of the page to the bottom. Those are all concepts of print that emergent readers need to be exposed to. You can do shared reading where you read aloud with the students' help and you talk about concepts of print. The texts are slightly harder than what most students can do independently, and these texts are specifically selected to advance student goals. So a lot of these books, the programs that we have today, they have big books, and they have big books that go with books on tape, or there are a lot of big books to choose from. So it really depends on what you're trying to achieve at that particular time. And then referencing print. So this talks about supporting it's high teacher support and feedback that gradually decrease. So it's that scaffolding again. First, you're supporting the students, and then gradually they're able to work more independently. And you're encouraging application of knowledge. So how do you read a book independently if you are an emergent reader? So there are many ways. Kids read the pictures. They read from memory. And sometimes, as they go, they recognize words and they read the words. So make sure that you read and reread favorite texts. Let students come up and read, a memorized, a book that they memorized, like Goodnight Moon, like a Dr. Seuss book. Read the room. So oftentimes you can have students have magnifying glasses or pretend ones, and they go and they read the print in the room. So that's where those word cards are really important. And reading, it needs to be very interactive and social. So students enjoy it and they see it as a social activity. Letters are the building blocks of print. So that's why those centers are very, very important. And having that environmental print is very important. Knowing letters enables phonemic awareness to develop. We start with the beginning sounds, but then students begin to connect the sounds to the letters, and this alphabet knowledge, just knowledge of the alphabet and the sounds that the individual's letters make, and phonemic awareness are the strongest predictors of that early reading success. So, the whole direct explicit instruction of phonics and phonemic awareness is really, really important here. Not every student necessarily needs that direct explicit instruction. However, it certainly can't hurt. And, that's where assessment comes into play as well. You can kind of figure out which students need the explicit instruction and which do not. And then the orientation of letters matters. So are they doing reversals, which is pretty, common early on, and can they recognize that a P is not a D, and so those are also parts of learning the alphabet. So with sound work, you want to begin with letters that represent the continuant sounds, so M and S, and then you go on to B and K, and when choosing sounds to teach, use contrasting sounds as well as sounds that are articulated differently. So students can learn to discriminate between those sounds. Units of print and so different ways to expose or to teach print and language. So you want to segment speech in running speech into words. You want them to be aware of syllables. So you're going to do like you want to do segmenting where it's b, at, but bat. So it may be 3 speech sounds, but it's 1 syllable. So you want them to be aware of the difference between the two. Rhyming, words that rhyme, and then onsets and rhyme, and those word families that kids can play around with. So they can manipulate sounds, they can manipulate letters, they can you want them to be able to segment um, letters, and then also to be able to um, manipulate the actual sounds and letters as well. And this just kind of gives them a more it just helps them develop an awareness of the phonemes and how words are put together, or how words work. So both phonological awareness and language, they work together. So and they we know this. We know that students need to be able to hear different sounds, be able to differentiate or distinguish between the different phonological sounds in order to develop uh, language. And they need phonemic awareness to match their speech to print. And basically, in terms of phonemic awareness, it's an auditory skill. It's auditory discrimination. It's anything, basically, if they can close their eyes, they hear it and they know what it is. That's phonemic awareness. They know what the letter is. They know, they know what the sound is, and they know what letter it's tied to. And these are developed by shared reading, shared writing, language play, teaching the alphabet and beginning consonant sounds, and sorting letters, sounds, and eventually words. So this is where your Words Their Way book has some really great resources and activities that you can use with your students. Emergent writing is also very developmental. So the kids usually start with scribbling, and then they have letter-like formations, but that they can tell you what they are, but you might not be able to wouldn't be able to necessarily decode that yourself. Then they start to write with letters and numbers that may not have any relationship to each other, and then representing the most salient sounds in words with representational drawing. So maybe book, you might have a B and a K, and then the drawing of the book. Inventive spelling, also known, it's phonic spelling, but we want kids to be able to experiment with spelling. You never want to discourage them from writing, and inventive spelling is part of that. And usually, again, they begin to write letters to represent the most salient sounds. And this is a shift. This marks the shift to the beginning stages of literacy development when they get to this point of inventive spelling. Motivation to write. So in order to motivate students to write, it's important to provide a lot of models of writing. And as students know more letters and they can represent them in words and they feel comfortable with writing, they'll also be more motivated to write. It can also be a way to reading, as learners slow down their process while spelling words. And the reading, writing, language connection, they talk about the language experience approach, or interactive writing. So basically, students and teacher working together to create a story, and it shows the relationship between reading, writing, and language. It's dictated by the group. The group also, they'll read it together. And then this is a great way to also, you can put that into a center so students can go back to it with their trackers and read the story when they're reading the room or as a center. Okay, so students are moving from the emergent to beginning stage when they have an understanding that letters represent sounds in their spelling, and when they have an understanding that a spoken word matches a written word in their reading. So that's where that transition lies. Um, I would suggest that you go back to the the other PowerPoint as well, because there's some interesting information there. I talk a little bit about the theorists and the early cognitive theorists, Piaget and Vygotsky, which I'm sure that you've heard about already, and you'll learn more about later on in Read 536. You're also going to be turning in the first part of your um, tutoring assignment, the description of a student. And I am going to start opening up the week in advance. I won't have the lecture up, but it will give you an opportunity to kind of see where we're going. And I hope you have a good week. Thanks. Bye.